Well, welcome to the panel on new perspectives on information theory. So we are being recorded for posterity here. And also, the idea is that we'll have an article in the information theory newsletter with a transcript of the panel, at least an edited transcript of the panel. So let me start by introducing my fellow panelists. We have Raymond Yeung from the Chinese University of Hong Kong. Max Costa, who has come all the way from the University of Campinas. Then we have Gerhard Kramer from the Technical University of Munich. And then we have Venkat Anantharam from the University of California at Berkeley. And finally, we have Giuseppe Caire from the University of Southern California. Okay, so let's get started. So 17 years ago, there was the IT workshop in Moscow. And in fact, they asked me to organize a panel like this. So I see a lot of people in the audience 17 years ago, 1994, did not know what information theory was. So in that panel, I had Dick Blake-Hood, Prakash Narayan, Mark Pinsker, Imre Chisar, and I think that's it. So anyway, so one of the questions that I put to this panel today was to look at the transcript of that panel that was published in the IT newsletter and think about the ways in which the predictions of that panel had been correct and ways in which they had not been correct about the future development of the subject. So that was my first question that I asked my fellow panelists to consider by looking at the transcript, what were the things that were correct. So let's start with Max.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks, Sergio, for inviting me to be in this very nice group. Well, it's been said that it's very difficult to make predictions, especially about the future. And the panel in '74 made some bold predictions, and they were right about a number of 94. They were right about a number of things, but it's very difficult to predict things that are really the result of a brand new technology and really come out of the blue. So there was another setting in which this happened. In 1961, Esther Green, a VP of Bell Labs, made some very courageous and bold predictions about the status of telecommunications technology in 2012, so 1 year from now. And in 1999, Bob Lucky had a paper, an article that described the points in which the predictions were going well and others that in which they were not. And again, those areas that came out of nothing were the ones that had implications on Green's predictions. For example, he did not account for optical communications and also the advent of internet. But his predictions were not completely off, because he was counting on a very fast growth of video communications through video telephony. You know, at that time, Bell Labs was investing heavily in video telephony, and of course, we all know that that project didn't go as they expected. But you know, the idea that an image is worth 1,000 words also goes for the rates. And so he was expecting a much greater traffic demand than actually happened, but not from video, but it happened from other reasons, like the internet. And this is essentially why it's very difficult to make predictions with such a a long stretch of time. In fact, in '99, when these predictions of green were sort of recasted, that they were trying to correct the course, they estimated that the capacity for fiber would be around 1 terabit per second. And we are already having 100 terabit per second in one fiber and 26 terabits per second from one laser source. So it's very difficult to have something followed exactly.
All right. Thank you, Max. So let's see. Venkat, you want to go now?
Hello, everybody. Let me also thank Sergio for the opportunity to participate in this panel. It was very interesting to look at the transcript of the 1994 panel, and I think there were some really striking omissions. One thing, there was no mention at all of LTPC codes or turbo codes, which I think is been more or less one of the defining features of research in our area for the past decade or so.
Actually, what happened was that the turbo codes had been presented at ICC just about a year before. And in fact, nobody believed, or very few people believed, that that paper was correct because it was just some simulations. And the LDPCs had not been rediscovered yet. So it was a curiosity in Gallagher's thesis.
So yeah, that speaks to the point about the danger of predicting the future. Another thing to note is that network coding had not yet been invented at the time. But from the point of view of someone who's sort of more interested in theoretical problems, I think one of the really striking things was that some of the problems that were posed as being the major open problems of the field, such as capacity regions for broadcast channels, relay channels, interference channels, they're all basically open. Of course, we know a lot more about them. We understand them in approximate senses. Also, I think there's kind of a sense about a dynamic having to do with what one actually means by information theory. That's pretty close to my own sense of how I perceive my role in this field. I think Shizar was one of the panelists, and he spoke quite eloquently on that front. He sort of presented himself as viewing information theory more as a sort of mathematical science than as a science that is entirely focused on applications. Now, that's not exactly where I stand, actually. I have a slightly broader point of view, and maybe we could explore that a bit on this panel. I think of information theory more as a science of understanding how to extract what is relevant from some kind of interaction between distributed entities in order for them to coordinate in some way. Communication to me is just one aspect of that, and in fact much of the discussion in our community is focused on applications of the notion of information and communications. But since this panel is looking forward towards new perspectives and maybe trying to predict the future, always a dangerous game, I would venture to say that we are likely to move in directions where the main applications are coming from areas that are not as focused on communications. For instance, interacting systems are present in a whole range of other kinds of physical aspects of nature, including biology, for instance, as a prominent example, or neuroscience, etc. So if you're venturing a prediction that's on the time scale of the time between 1994 and 2011, which is a pretty significant time scale, I would say maybe if you're looking at this field 15 to 20 years from now, it might not be as communication theory centric as it is now.
How about Raymond?
Well, in the 1994 transcript, we read that Pinsker and Chiesa were trying to explore along the line that whether information theory is just applied mathematics, but also some kind of pure mathematics. My own point of view is that information theory is both applied mathematics and also pure mathematics, because there's some pure mathematics content in it. Okay, in the 1994 transcript, Pinsker brought up that the application of information theory to ergodic theory, and that was a very major impact. And she's talked about application of information theory to statistics. This is more like a specific topic as far as I'm concerned, but nevertheless, it shows that information theory has some pure mathematics elements in it, which is always my belief. In fact, it's I would say that it's this particular reason that has been keeping me very interested in information theory. And along this line, during the last 15 years or so, the work by a few others and also by myself on the study of entropy functions have established a link with a few other branches of mathematics. Now we know that there's a common structure between entropy functions, group theory, network coding, and also homomorphic complexity. And the results along this line also has implications in conditional independence in probability, and also most recently we are interested in how we can use differential entropy functions to study inequalities regarding positive definite matrices. So definitely I believe there's some pure mathematics elements in information theory. So another thing is that information theory is also is not a special kind of mathematics if you want to think of it that way. In many branches of mathematics, applied mathematics, researchers in the field are users of results from pure mathematics. But you can think of information theory being a branch of applied probability. But it's also very different from probability theory, because if you talk to a probability theorist, most likely he or she would know very little about information theory. And that's why very often in information theory we have to develop the tools from scratch. So that's something rather unique about information theory. And another thing which I find very unique about information theory is that for other branches of applied mathematics, we very often use mathematics to model a physical system. For example, control theory, signal analysis, mechanics, that kind of thing. But for information theory, we're using mathematics to model information. So there's one layer of abstraction, but the information by itself is also something rather abstract. It's not a very physical system. So there, in information theory, there are two layers of abstractions, which makes the subject very subtle and interesting, as far as I'm concerned. And therefore, after so many years, we still, from time to time, find that there's some very basic things which are not well understood and not well defined, and that's have been keeping me very interested in the subject.
In fact, I think that in the minds of some people, information theory also raises some suspicions, because they view it, those who have heard about it but perhaps have not come close to it, especially physicists, view information theory as something that escapes from physics, because they view entropy as being something that was developed in statistical mechanics and dynamics, and then somehow Shannon rediscovered it. And the origin of our field is such that a lot of the arguments that Shannon gave were turned out to be very precise mathematically, but originally in 1948 were not fully elaborated. So the reception that it got from mathematicians was quite cool, especially in the US. And I think since then, in some quarters, they have viewed our field with a certain degree of suspicion.
Can I add something to that?
Sure, please.
Well, speaking of that, a few years ago, I met a student of Komogoro when he was visiting our university in Hong Kong. And when he knew that I was working on information theory, he was very interested in talking to me. And in fact, Alon Maliski himself was also visiting at that moment. And I told him that I'm not a mathematician by training, and so for the mathematics that I use all the time, I know them quite well, but there are certain, a good number of branches of mathematics that I know nothing about. And he said that that's okay. Shannon was an engineer too, but he actually was not entirely correct, because Shannon got his PhD in mathematics. And then he went on to talk about, how Kolmogorov thought about Shannon. And in fact, I knew that Kolmogorov worked on information theory, but I did not know that Kolmogorov had such a high regard of Shannon. Okay. In fact, when Shannon's work was translated to Russian, somehow the section on entropy power inequality was missing. Okay. And subsequently, Kolmogorov found out that was the case, and he was very upset. He said that how come they could have missed this very important result by Shannon. And then a few years ago, I think it was 2 years ago, I visited Qualcomm, and there I met a Russian guy, and we talked about Shannon and Kolmogorov, and then he told me that well, you guys in the West compiled a collection of papers by Shannon in around 2000. In Russia, we had it already in 1963, and then he rushed to his own office and brought a copy of that collection and showed it to me, and it was all Russian, and there I found a word which I thought means Shannon, and I said, is this Shannon's name in Russian? He said, yes. Okay. And then he showed me the preface, which was written by Kolmogorov, and basically he said basically Kolmogorov said that Shannon has a tremendous engineering insight, although he didn't really prove anything. That's Kolmogorov's point of view.
Let's see, Giuseppe.
Still on the topic of predicting the future?
Well, no, I mean, if you want to address the question of that panel, the 94 panel, otherwise, if you'd rather move on, we can.
No, I mean, I can talk about the panel. It was very interesting to read the various viewpoints of these people, and also the fact that some of the major development that followed, say, if you think that 94 was already, well, internet was very well developed, even though not as ubiquitous and fundamental as it is now, and wireless was already quite, let's say, coming up very, very strongly in Europe, especially. I think in '94 was already post TDMA versus CDMA battle in the US.
Yeah, but actually in the commercial world in '94, I think you could only get an analog phone.
Not in Europe.
No, maybe not in Europe, but in the US.
GSM was already very strong.
Yeah, in the US it still was.
Yeah.
Analog, yeah.
3G started in '96, so we are like 2 years shy of wideband CDMA UMTS, and it was very, to me, quite striking to see that there was, I think, very little emphasis on networks in all the interventions. I didn't see, well, there were a lot of, going, say, engineering versus mathematics, and the importance of information theory on other fields of mathematics, like ergodic theory and other things. And there was a little bit of information theory, say Shannon theory versus coding. There was the Forney and Blehat viewpoint and the Prakash Narayan and Caesar viewpoint. To me, really the big missing word there was networks. I didn't find, Internet and wireless have dominated the past 20 years in one way or another, and it was pretty missing there.
Well, I sort of disagree just slightly with Giuseppe's comment right now. If you read the transcript, networks were actually mentioned by several people as an important future topic perhaps not a topic that was looked at in detail at that time. That was one of the things that actually caught my eye. There were a couple of others going to the question that Sergio posed about succeeding or erring on future predictions, so I'll mention a couple more of those. So networks were mentioned by several people as an important future topic. Interestingly, Dick Blayhoot mentioned or correctly predicted the importance of energy. So if you read some of his comments, he predicted that energy, especially energy of computation, will be a very important thing. And that took quite some time to become especially important, but now, of course, we talk a lot about energy for a whole bunch of reasons. It's a very hot topic today. And I also noticed that Dick Blayhoot, although he correctly predicted the importance of energy, he incorrectly predicted something else. The panel was in Moscow. He had predicted there would be an ISIT in Moscow by 2004. So he wasn't quite right about that. There was one in St. Petersburg this year, of course.
Actually, he offered $1,000. He said, I'll wage anybody right now $1,000 that I think he said in 10-15 years there will be a chip that implements algebraic geometry codes.
Does that exist?
I don't know. Does anybody know whether such a thing exists? No. It's too bad we didn't take the bet.
Well, we could try to collect.
So I wanted to point out a couple of things about Sergio too. So he made some comments as well. He predicted that the probabilistic school, so although the turbo codes perhaps weren't mentioned and in detail and people didn't believe it, Sergio did predict that the probabilistic school is gaining ground in coding theory on the combinatorial school. And I think that certainly was right. Maybe not so obvious to see at that time, in the sense that turbo and the rediscovery of LDPC codes really dominated coding for many years after that. With a few exceptions, network coding, of course, the algebraic work is important or has become important. He also correctly predicted the importance of the interference channel, so he did mention that interference would be something important. That took some time to develop. On the other hand, to balance that, he was a little bit overcautious. I'm going to read a statement he made in that 1994 transcript. He said, "Maybe the day will come when a software package will enable the engineer to closely approach capacity on almost any channel with the technology of the day. Admittedly, I'm afraid it is us who will be dead when that day arrives." But I would say about 7 years later, of course, the LDPC codes were developed incredibly rapidly shortly after that, and you can, of course, by around 2001 or 2, you could download from the internet degree distributions that approach capacity on any, I would say, practical channel.
All right, I'm gonna stand by this statement. I made it in '94 because if you actually, as Gerhard said, I said in almost any channel. So, in fact, you know, the subset of information theory that deals with finding capacity of channels is still a flourishing subject. So, a lot of people are what I call mutual information theorists, whose work centers in actually maximizing mutual information. I mean, in many practical channels, it's still an open problem. You know, especially fading channels when you have both, frequency fading, time fading, and so on. It's still a very tough problem. And it's only been in the last few years that we've been able to make those, to find out the capacity of some of these channels with some of the new mathematical tools like random matrices and so on. So that is a kind of proof that still we are nowhere near a point where we would have a very complicated black box and then we would be able to find out what is not only the capacity, but actually what are optimal coding strategies for it. I mean, think of the counterpart in data compression, where we don't need to know anything about the source. in order to achieve its fundamental limits. Of course, provided it satisfies some stationary conditions and so on. So, you know, you could think of a problem where I give you a black box and I enable you. I say you can inject any inputs you want to it, and you can observe the output due to those inputs, and then see from those derive what would be a good coding strategy for that. So we are really nowhere near there. But you know, we were saying that one of the things that was obviously missing from that panel was any discussion on sparse graph codes, understandably because they had just the turbo codes had just been invented. But actually, 2 years later, I was asked to be the editor, the guest editor for the special 50-year anniversary of information theory in transactions. And I did ask for several papers on coding theory, several tutorials, including one on algebraic geometry codes, but I didn't ask for any tutorials on turbo codes. So that tells something about my vision.
Believe yourself. You had predicted probabilistic approach would be the right important approach, but somehow you didn't seem to believe it.
Right. Well, yeah, I mean, it was a kind of like a delayed, the turbo revolution took a little bit of time to actually sink in how important it was. I did mention that there was a renaissance on physical layer research. And, you know, 10 years before, when I was a graduate student, you know, a lot of people did not believe in physical layer anymore. And I was like, okay, you know, all the important problems now are networks and you know, applications and so on. You still hear a lot of this nowadays. But in retrospect, it was really wireless, the wireless revolution that made this physical layer research, in fact, the renaissance of noise, as I put it in that panel, a reality. So really, that was the key. So in fact, one of the questions I had put to that panel was so many people claim that information theory is dead. So do you think that's true? And if not, what evidence do we have to the contrary? And when I was reading that, I was thinking, you know, I would never ask this panel this question today. To the panel, because I don't think that we have such gloomy or such defensive attitude anymore. I think there is a lot of optimism in our field. So, you know, one of the reasons I wanted to address is why is that? Why do you think now we are less depressed than we were in '94? So let's see, who wants to take that? Gerhard?
I believe a very important, what started this confidence was to a large degree turbo codes. I mean, turbo codes made mutual information an engineering quantity. Before that, I remember as a master's student, I was in Canada, but you talked a lot about cutoff rate, right? Mutual information, people weren't confident about that. And all of a sudden, that made such a huge difference. Just getting back to the panel discussion itself, a lot of the discussion since you had posed that question to the panel in 1994, the talk was about this question. And in my opinion, the right response and also the best response to that question was given by Cesar and also by Dick Blehu. Both of them emphasized that as long as information theory continues to attract the best and the brightest young people, things will be fine. And I think very sure that will continue to be the case. We'll adapt, but we'll continue to do very well, I think. Dave Forney said that what will attract such young people will be having difficult and relevant problems. I don't think we have any lack of those kinds of problems. One thing I do want to say too, Dick Blehu himself thought in that panel discussion, he wrote or said that it wasn't necessary to be defensive or negative concerning information theory, and he wrote that he's living in the decade of information, and this was back in '94. And I would say that decade has now continued on for 17 years, and I think it's still going to continue on for many, many years longer. I can add one more comment about this too. It was very interesting for me when I finished my PhD, and then you often start visiting other universities, especially in the United States, and it was interesting for me to see how at those places that had a very long history and tradition of information theory, talking about very theoretical subjects, my thesis was on a very theoretical subject, was accepted very, very positively. And then when I went to schools to give the same talk that didn't have this tradition, the reaction was generally quite cool. And I suspect that you will still find that today. But the places like Bell Labs, they always respected information theory for the applications, for the insight it could give into your applications. And this is something I really learned during my time at Bell Labs too. It was a place where information theory was always respected and always held very highly, of course, because of the tradition, but that was an incredibly positive experience for me.
Giuseppe?
According to me, there is one fundamental reason why today nobody would ask this question, is information theory dead or alive, is that the facts have demonstrated that information theory has won big in essentially providing really the framework to design systems that turn out to be the winner. I would say, especially in wireless, not only. DSL is another example where mutual information, water filling, power allocation, all of the thing, adaptive rate and coded modulation, turbo codes, all these things, get together and provided better systems. In fact, in the past maybe 15 years, there are very famous examples of major failures, systems that were just badly designed and gave a lot of problems to the system designers once something is standardized. Then people start fighting against the standard instead of fighting against the fundamental limits of the nature of the problem itself, just because they were designed from, let's say, common sense engineering. And then, well, after a couple of years, people realized that they should have gone back to the principles and rethink and redesign. That it's not by accident that CDMA has been progressively de-emphasized, and OFDM, which is more or less what say Shannon teaches us to do in a frequency selective channel, is taking over everywhere in wireless, in DSL. That's just an example. So I think that today, of course, in our community, it goes without saying, but anywhere, any company, talk to, so from Lucent to Qualcomm to whatever, people give quite for granted that the right way of looking at problems is to start understanding the fundamentals, and then maybe get insight and design systems. But it may not have been so trivial and so obvious 20 years ago. For other reasons also. I mean, I think Moore's law has played in our favor. What was very difficult or science fictional 20 years ago, now you can do it on an iPhone. So I think that all these things got together in somehow declaring the, let's call it quote unquote the Shannon approach. So simplify the problem, get the fundamentals, and then extract what is important and the fundamental ideas to be the winning approach. And so right now, I think that if there is one question to ask is perhaps why, as a community, we do not, perhaps, I think we still suffer from some complex, but now it's not the complex of the survivors, are we dead or alive? It's a complex of perhaps a little bit of lack of recognition. There are bigger areas in engineering with much more money that somehow tend to grab here and there our results, put them in their systems, and then just be completely self-referential. If sufficient to go to SIGCOM, go to Infocom to a certain extent, and see what kind of paper they reference. It's interesting, I would say. I don't want to be over aggressive, but it is interesting to see that perhaps we suffer a little bit of lack of recognition.
Thank you. Let's see. Max, you want to address this?
Before I address that, well, let me just comment on what Raymond just mentioned. It's true that some of the proofs of what Shannon could see were not there, like the EPI, for example, entropy power inequality, was later proved by Stam and Blackman, but he could already, have that tremendous insight of seeing that that was essentially the isoperimetric inequality. So this amazing insight that Shannon had was also what led him to the random coding argument. I remember a class that Kober gave in a course in information theory. He'd say, if I had that, thought of random coding argument, I think I would just go home and sober up. So, also to point to that recognition of the work of Shannon. There was a time when in ISIT in Brighton that he came in with his wife, and this was something not anticipated. And then there was this big commotion in the meeting, and Bob McLeese said, "Oh, it was just like if in a conference of physicists somebody said, 'Oh, Newton is here.'" So tremendous recognition. Now, to address the issue, that we've seen these obituaries of information theory coming up from time to time. Right now, it's actually a time that we have a better perspective. But coding theory also went through that, and there were a number of times that people said, "Oh, it's dead." And one of the first times that happened in the perhaps late 70s was followed not too far, not too long later, by the invention of trellis-coded modulation and all the activity that it generated. A little bit later, again, people said, well, maybe now it's dead. And then we had turbo coding coming up in 1993 and the rediscovery of LDPCs. So I think it's very difficult to make both predictions like that on such long stretches of time. Also, we are just seeing the dawn of the information age. So how can we think that information theory will be that? Also, there are a number of schools that are changing their engineering denominations from the classical names to names like information engineering. That's the case, in fact, in Chinese University of Hong Kong. We have some universities here also that are going that way. Energy engineering, environmental engineering, and that points to the importance of looking at the resources. And being resourceful is one of the highlights of information theory, I think.
Thank you, Max. Raymond?
Well, I just want to add something to what Max just said about Shannon's engineering insight. Well, it's really amazing to me that while Shannon can be sloppy, there's not a single incident that he is found wrong. Can someone correct me? It's really amazing. I mean, in most mathematical subjects, if you do your proofs sloppily, you're bound to get some wrong results. But not in the case of Shannon. I really don't understand. Okay.
I wouldn't say that it was sloppy. I mean, he was writing a paper in the Bell System Technical Journal. If you look at the papers that were written then in that journal, we cannot judge with the standards of the IT transactions in 2011 back then. So he was trying actually to write a very readable paper, and he was definitely capable of carrying very abstract mathematical arguments, as you can see in some of the appendices and so on. So I don't think sloppy is the right word.
Maybe incomplete.
Yeah, I guess the fact that there are no, well, there are some epsilons and deltas, but not everywhere.
Well, all of a sudden, I am thinking about the year 2028 when Sergio is going to organize yet another panel discussion on this, and people then will be talking about what we are talking about today.
Let's hope that I am not dead by then. All right, so let's see. Anybody wants to say?
I do want to say something more. One thing that I found interesting, and it goes a little bit into this, maybe I can say, I think Shannon was trying to, before I launch into that, I think Shannon was trying to reach a very broad audience, and I'm very, very glad he wrote the paper the way he did. And I think from what I can tell, I wasn't there at the time, of course, but from what I see, it was very popular very quickly. And part of the reason, I think, was precisely because he wrote the paper the way he did. He wrote it in a very accessible fashion, trying to reach people, not just mathematicians, not just mathematically minded engineers and so on. And in fact, when I look at the panel from '94, you have Dave Forney, Vic Blehut, perhaps someone people I could categorize as engineers more. You had Imre Cizar and Mark Pinsker, but people who I could categorize as mathematicians, and perhaps two people somewhere in between, if I can do it that way, Sergio and Prakash. And this might be categorizing people a little too much, but I think the point I'm trying to make with that is I have the feeling that the people on this panel the span isn't quite as broad. And I also have the feeling that our community has become more uniform over the years. There isn't this breadth there aren't the same number of mathematicians who are there working on problems, or engineers who are directly connected to industry. And I hope you disagree with me on that. I think it would be nice to recapture that if it is true.
Yeah, in fact, I totally agree with that. If you look at the topics that we have in our information theory symposiums, you definitely see that the entropy of the topics has actually decreased. So, there are many sessions on, say, for example, network coding, thanks to Raymond.
The champion last time was LDPC.
All right, I know that hurts. So definitely the mathematicians, every time there are less and less, people like Paul Shields, Kathy Martin, Janos Korner, Imre Cizar still comes, Rudy Alsuede is no longer with us. The Russian school, very powerful force in information theory through the decades. Now, it's suffering from a lack of influx of young people. So that is unfortunate. On the other hand, a good trend is that many of the engineers in places like Qualcomm and IBM Research, HP Labs, Bell Labs, and so on, they are very well versed in information theory. So I think that's a good trend. But definitely, I would think that that the entropy of topics has decreased. Answering my own question about what was the reason for this renaissance in information theory that we've seen in the last few years. One is the great number of very talented young people that have come into the subject, and another one is the successes in information theory in the real world, in having design driven by information theory. And so we have already alluded to the sparse graph codes. Universal data compression is another great triumph of information theory. Voice band modems, reaching the capacity of those, again, was one of the pinnacles of applying information theory in the real world. Discrete multitone modulation, the basis for DSL, again, very much driven by information theory. Multi-user detection, the fact that Shannon says, all right, you shouldn't disregard the channel, you shouldn't just model interference as just thermal noise, especially digitally modulated signals. You should, in fact, use signal processing at the receiver to take care of those. And in fact, MIMO, for example, is a prime example of that, where you don't just think that everything else is noise. And space-time codes, another great triumph of information-related thinking, which is now in standards. Opportunistic signaling, network coding, of course. So we could go on and on and on about fundamental insights that come from our field that have had a huge impact in the real world. So I think there is a growing recognition in industry that information theory provides really the only reliable guidance for good design, principles. Especially when you want to be efficient, when you want to conserve energy, when you want to conserve bandwidth. So it used to be that technology was so primitive that the question really was how to do it. We knew what to do, but we didn't know how to do it. Because nowadays, it's the other way around, really, because technology has gotten us to a point where the real question is what to do. And still there are many problems that are very poorly understood by network information theory. It's been an enormous amount of work that has gone into that, especially in the last few years. And very much thanks to Cover and Thomas' nice book that started in 1991. But, and now, of course, the book by El Gamal and Kim is also going to have a huge impact on the development of the field. But by and large, problems like the broadcast channel, interference channels, and so on, we still don't have a very good understanding. Yes?
I might like to add a couple of notes of caution while we're busy in congratulating ourselves on how successful we've been. I think we've also been great beneficiaries of a lot of serendipity, actually. My own broad view of research is that there's a certain kind of randomness involved in the generation of new ideas, and many of the ideas that have actually driven the field, and I fully agree with many of the things that were said about the impact we're having and the fact that we're not so paranoid about whether we play a role or not. But I do think that a good part of it is not of our own doing. I mean, there are individual results, great results that have come out with perhaps atypical frequency over the last couple of decades. These include some of the great ideas that were mentioned by Sergio. But quite apart from that, there's also just the general evolution of technology. The fact that, as Giuseppe mentioned, Moore's law, and then just the driver that hardware provides for the ability to sort of create problems where we are relevant is something that we shouldn't forget. And in fact, if at some point we get to the discussion of new directions, one can imagine a whole range of applications of some of our techniques at levels that we have not even mentioned so far, or were not even conceived of in the previous panel, having to do with coding at the level of, for instance, communication over buses and things of that sort. So I mean, my main point in the context of this discussion is just that we should also be a little bit humble about why we are so successful. It's not entirely of our own making.
Yeah, that's very true. But actually, an interesting exercise is to contrast ourselves, to contrast our community with another community that in many ways is similar to us, in the sense that is very much focused on abstract thinking, very smart people in it, and so on. And I'm referring to the community of complexity theory within theoretical computer science. And they, of course, they are occupied with also fundamental limits. What is the inherent hardness of certain computer problems, algorithmic problems. And of course, the ultimate goal is to prove that NP is not equal to P. So they are still quite far away from that goal, and they have been devoting a lot of efforts to studying the role of randomness in computation, the foundations of cryptography, interactive proofs, quantum computing, and so on. But Andy Yao, for example, who is one of the leading members of the school, he says that it's like monkeys trying to climb trees in order to reach the moon. So, so the big difference, I think, with our community is that, in essence, the real world of technology keeps us honest and keeps us grounded and relevant. And I think that's really very positive for our community. It gives us certainly a lot of credibility for the outside world. So for us, when we see a 10% improvement in a coding scheme, that grabs our attention. For the complexity theory people, when you tell them that you are excited about 10%, they look at you with a strange face. So, for them, it's a community that the linear growth or n to the 1,000 essentially means that it's an easy problem to compute. All right, so just like 94, I think it would be futile for us to try to predict what the big breakthroughs are going to be, because by definition the big breakthroughs are unpredictable. But nevertheless, I think it's useful to discuss what are the current topics that we think are going to have the highest chance to have an impact on the future development of information theory. So, Gerhard?
It's actually well into what you just said with industry topics. I think the fact that it's good that if we are, at least some of us, not everyone need to be, of course, but grounded in practical topics, because it gives us a lot more problems to look at too, and a lot more fun things to do. I have a couple of favorite topics, so that's what I'll predict becomes important. I guess most of us would probably do that, I don't know. One topic I think will be important, and it's growing in importance in the optical community, is multi-input, multi-output transmission. So especially for long-haul fiber, both from energy as well as rate bottleneck considerations, using multi-core fiber or actually using multiple modes. So you make the core bigger and then multiple modes can travel down the fiber. That's a hot area right now, building those kinds of receivers and transmitters in a cost-effective way, and also determining the capacity of networks that use those kinds of fiber. Also short haul, the MIMO approach is becoming more and more important. I think that will continue. Second favorite topic of mine is to see whether we can make some of the insights we've been getting on network information theory, like interference channels, especially relay channels in particular, whether we can make these enter practice, for example, for 5th generation systems. I think that should be an important topic, and I think it will help. I think these things will make a difference, from interference alignment to more sophisticated relaying methods. And I'm also, another topic I think will be important is what Raymond is really focusing on, that's network coding, bringing that into distributed storage. I think that's something that will happen. I really do think so, and I think it's going to, network coding will have an important impact in that area.
Okay, so I'm going myself to say something that will be completely disproved in the next 5 years, so then everybody will laugh in the next panel. So from my viewpoint, what I would like to see in the, let's say, near future, near in a time horizon of let's say 5-6 years, is sort of, let's say, communication theory for networks. Today, we have this fantastic insight, new insight in network information theory, relay channel, interference channel, multi-hop, scaling laws, all this nice stuff, okay? And then we have the coding theory, and then still some relatively tiny group of people. It was very big in the 80s after trellis coded modulation, after Angerbach. Everybody were designing, you know, signal codes, TCM, going after spectral efficient schemes. Right now, I think the emphasis has changed a little bit. There's a recentering on algebraic, discrete channels, binary, polar codes, but still, it looks like coding has not really gone out of the point-to-point channel, and especially coding in the signal space. There is a little bit of lattices. They are mostly used as theoretical tools to say, okay, what you can do here, you can also do it with lattices, or maybe structured codes give you something different, something a little bit more. Still, we are very far from a plug-and-play approach for which you could take, you know, an Angerbach code, put it into a channel and gain 3 dB or gain, I don't know, this many bits per second per hertz. Probably network coding for point-to-point networks or storage application is closer to get to that point for which you in fact have systems and design, you know, peer-to-peer, avalanche, these kind of things that we have seen also from Kanan Ramchandran tutorial, plenary talk. But right now, there is still an enormous gap. When somebody cracks the degrees of freedom of a certain configuration with 4 users, okay, what does it tell us in terms of, can I design a code for this network? Do I get better results than, I don't know, say, time sharing in reasonable conditions? So we are still very, very far from there. And at a certain point, we should somehow translate this insight in a communication theory for networks, for which we stop having trivial physical layers, basically based on splitting dimensions or taking multi-access as collisions, as all the networks we are using today do. Right? So now we are using AO2.11, carrier sense. You're using a 3rd generation system or a 4th generation system. It is essentially splitting the spectrum and dimension and orthogonalizing the users. So you see the gap, right? At the moment, I see that this is an area where there's this enormous gap. There are sentiments that this new insight really gives big advantages, but these big advantages is still, you know, in the sense, okay, asymptotically at infinitely large SNR, these type of things. There is no networked physical layer communication theory that has really incorporated this insight in solid system design. And somehow, that talking about diversity of, I remember there was a ISAT, I think in Ulm, 97. Half of the sessions were trellis coded modulation. And this was well after the invention of turbo codes. The one after, say 1 year after, there were like 2. Okay? So there is an enormous community of people.
That's actually a good sign, right?
Yeah.
The community is able to respond quickly.
Well, quickly.
Actually, I was talking to some people who are close to the 5th generation that is now people are starting to think about this. And what they were telling me is that now the trend is against trying to orthogonalize. And that, you know, just let interference and deal with interference, maybe at the receiver, but maybe also things at the transmitter. So I was thinking, you know, this sounds like when Chamberlain came back from Munich, Winston Churchill said, you had to choose between war and dishonor, and you chose dishonor, and you will have war. So here, the conventional thinking of trying to orthogonalize transmissions is like choosing dishonor, and at the end you end up having interference also that you have to deal with.
No, you're perfectly right. What I'm just saying is that is a matter of fact, right? That there is this disconnect, and this system we are using today try to orthogonalize in one way. And I haven't seen yet this big change in the coding part, in the coding design part. Maybe, you know, the day, I don't know, polar codes for multi-user channel become ubiquitous and you can solve all the problems by polarization. Who knows? But at the moment, coding and network information theory, apart from network coding, are a little bit on their own. And I think they have to get together sooner or later.
All right. Who wants to go next? Venkat?
Yeah, I'll go next. I'm right next to Giuseppe. So as I said in the beginning, I think much of the success that we've had in this field is focused on problems that are centered in the communications arena. But if I were to venture to predict something, I think my general view of information as a science is quite a bit broader than that. And there's essentially vast realms out there that are waiting to be conquered by what you might call information theoretic thinking. Shannon basically brought information theoretic thinking to bear on communications as a science. But there are sciences like biology, for instance, which are, or various other aspects of nature, in fact, which to me are somehow have to have been designed with some kind of optimization implicit, either in nature or you know, well, basically in the nature of biology, for instance. They have to have been designed with some kind of an optimization of some information content in view. So the right viewpoint of information theory for me is one that somehow provides a way of extracting relevant structure from various kinds of behaviors. Communications is just one aspect of that. But when you have lots of interacting entities, either evolving in nature or entities that you want to design, maybe when you're trying to design a biological system, which is eventually going to happen with the rise of molecular biology, etc., there has to be a thinking implicit both in the engineered design and in nature as it came up with the designs that we are aware of today, which involved some kind of notion of some information aspect that was optimized in communicating between entities. So if I was to venture to predict something, I'm not sure what time scale this will happen, but biology is advancing at an enormous rate, so it could very well be 20 years, but maybe longer. I think what we'll see is actually a success of information theoretic thinking as a paradigm in lots of areas that have nothing to do with communication. Much of the discussion so far has basically been about that, and of course we are going to see all these great things happening in communications, which is very close to our hearts. But if you were to come to a meeting with the title Information Theory Workshop 20 years from now, well, maybe if you're lucky, we'll have, 20% of the papers where people are discussing why a certain organ in the body works the way it does because the cells manage to organize the communications between themselves because they were optimizing some kind of information measure. And we're really waiting for the Shannon for all of these different fields. And that Shannon hasn't arrived. It's not clear if the information theory will look the way Shannon's information theory does. But I think we can be rest assured that the Shannon will eventually come for all these fields.
We're waiting for the second coming of the Messiah. So, in fact, it's interesting you mentioned that because now there is this Venkat and I actually are part of the Science of Information Center that the National Science Foundation is supporting in the US a consortium of universities, MIT, Stanford, Berkeley, Princeton, Verdú, and some others. And one of the objectives there is to have people like that, people in physics, biology, economics. In fact, one of the members of the center just got a Nobel Prize in economics last week. So he actually uses information theory in his research. So, you know, there's hope for us. We can get a Nobel Prize by using Shannon. So anyway, let me pass the baton to Max.
I mentioned something about the increase in capacity that we are seeing with fibers transmitting at 100 terabits per second. But just to mention something that is anticipated in the demand side, the traffic in the internet is supposed to multiply by 4 in the next 4 years, and we're supposed to have 15 billion network connected devices by 2015. And the expected traffic is supposed to be 1 zettabyte per year, 10 to 21. So when we get together in Hong Kong for SIT, we will be able to check on those predictions. But I think on the long run, on not focusing strictly on communications, but for information theory, I think there will be a number of changes that will come up, particularly because of some of the connections that were already mentioned with economics and biology. In fact, we have already seen some BCH code structures in some proteins, and I think that little by little, these mysteries of biological codes will be discovered. And of course, there will be a tremendous impact. That will have a tremendous impact on what we would be able to do with that. I think polar codes also will have a great impact, and they will be extended to multiple user channels. We already seen something happening with the multiple access channels in that regard. Modern coding theory is now basically prevalent, and to some extent is replaced the drive in algebraic coding theory. But I think that this will make, algebraic coding theory will make a comeback, a strong comeback with network coding applications, where you realize that some of the intermediate nodes don't have to have all the information, like the x and the y. They can just have a function of x and y, and so that the rates can be decreased, and you can have the mean cut, maximum flow mean cut limits being beaten. Also, quantum codes, I think, will come to be something that people will relate to them in a more pragmatic way. The anticipated impact, I think, is tremendous. One of the things that I noticed is, I remember, again, Tom Cover talking about network and multiple access or multiple user channels as the driver to a more general network understanding. And of course, the setting at that time was completely different. Again, Shannon was the first one to write something about multiple user channels with the two-way channel in 1961. And even though we have had this tremendous advances and development in network coding theory, we haven't seen yet a marriage of that with the basic tiles or the basic rigs that form multiple user structures, like the broadcast channels, multiple access channels, the interference channels, the relay channels. I think there'll be more of that. That may be a stretch. That may take a long time, but I think eventually we'll see some integration between these two approaches, network coding and multiple user information theory. Also, source coding is still far from achieving limits. I must say that I didn't expect to be alive on the day that channel coding limits would be approached as they are, within a small fraction of a dB. I really thought that this was going to be happening after me, but now we can think that source coding is still not at that point, and hopefully it will still be around when we see that that limit being approached to small fractions of a dB. I think also that we will have improved inequalities and new inequalities that will help with a number of applications and also scientific and mathematical issues. So I think that rather than thinking that information theory is coming to some type of blockade, I think that information theory will never die. And I would quote Karl Popper on something similar to the monkeys trying to reach the moon. I have a son that's a philosopher, so we have frequent discussions about things, and this is something that he told me. Karl Popper used to say that we may be very different in the ways we do things and our abilities and our knowledges about things, but in our infinite ignorance, we are all alike.
Well, a few years ago, I had a chat with Prakash Narayan, who was a panelist 17 years ago, and I was pointing out the fact that in the control theory community, people have been using optimization tools for decades. Okay, and Prakash made a very interesting point. He said that once the structure of the problem is exposed, what remain are algorithms and optimization. So I think at least in the context of communication, I think in the information theory community, we are going to see more and more of that. Since we are still on the broad topic of perspective of information theory, I want to pick up the point that Sergio mentioned a little while ago regarding the lack of entropy of topics at ISIT. Personally, this actually bothers me quite a bit. Okay? I remember visiting Jim Massey, I think in the early 2000s at Copenhagen, and we had a good conversation. I was mentioning to Jim that these days research has become so competitive that in many areas, if you don't publish something immediately, then very likely 3 months later somebody else would publish the same result, right? And Jim said that, well, in that case you shouldn't publish the result. Yeah, that's his point of view, and I'm not sure whether this is the best way to survive in today's research environment. But one thing is that ideally we should all be working on problems that we think are important instead of following what the trend is doing all the time. And but one thing is that in the United States in particular, that the research is pretty much driven by funding. I mean, whatever they call for, you have to work on it. Although you can do things in disguise, but you have to follow the game. So maybe Sergio and Venkat can do something at NSF regarding this.
Well, I always say that there are 3 traits in a researcher that are very good. And these are traits that in ordinary life are not very good at all. And one of them is claustrophobia. I think it's very good to be claustrophobic when you're a researcher because you tend to shy away from things that are very trendy. Another one that I find very good is attention deficit disorder, because that makes you work on, keep you fresh and get new challenges frequently. And the third one is you have to have a streak of laziness in you, because if you if you are willing to work very, very hard, in fact, a lot of mathematicians, a lot of good mathematicians are like that. They try to avoid taking a long route. They try to put a lot of effort into making their life easier. And I think that's a good trait. Well, looking at my crystal ball, going forward, we already mentioned multi-user information theory as an area that is pregnant with some breakthroughs. Also, we have alluded to intersections of information theory with machine learning, for example. Machine learning is definitely a discipline in the upswing. Intersections with signal processing. For example, lately we have been working on interactions between minimum square estimation and information measures that have been quite useful. Compressed sensing, another big success story in the last few years, and indeed this community has been one of the primary movers for that. And intersections with theoretical computer science, you know, things like interactive communications and randomness, complexity, and so on. Those things may have very interesting problems lying there. And then another thing is that hopefully, you know, 17 years from now, we will look back to these days as the era of bad quality. Like, you know, if you try to get into Skype and you have a very nice connection, it sounds great, but otherwise it can be pretty frustrating. Standard definition television looks terrible now that we, you know, we are used to high definition. On the other hand, I don't know, young people doesn't seem to care a lot about quality, so people, you know, just listen to music on their earphones, download it from iTunes, and they don't care whether the quality is the same as with CD players. So, but what is really true is that lossy compression has not reached the same level of success as the other two problems that were introduced by Shannon. So the gap between theory and practice there is a lot wider than in the other two. And of course, we have to deal with tough issues like understanding how the human ear and the human eye really work. We're very far from that. Once we understand that, we will be able to fool them much better than we're able to fool them nowadays. And another thing I wanted to bring up is something that is very popular in my office these days, and is non-asymptotic information theory. And in fact, my student Victoria Costina, who's sitting right here, gave a talk about this yesterday. And the idea is that in many problems of practical interest, you don't have the luxury of having a lot of delay. You may have packets of 500 bits, 1,000 bits. You may have to compress messages that are extremely short. Then the question is how close to the fundamental limits predicted by information theory, the asymptotic limits, can you be if you have those constraints? And of course the problem is tough because you cannot expect that you're going to have nice closed form formulas like you have in the asymptotic limit, but yet you can still do you can still get a lot of interesting results that are relevant to the practical world. So, you know, there's been already progress, especially in the area of channel coding, but I think we're also in the right track for compression. So, in fact, when I teach information theory, I am very much a champion of the idea of separating the information theoretic thinking, which is inherently non-asymptotic, from the ultimate step, the final step, which is to invoke asymptotic results like the law of large numbers or ergodic theories in order to come up with the nice final formulas. So new mathematic methods we've seen in the last few years. Random matrices have an impact, and in fact the contributions have not just been being consumers of results in random matrices, which is a relatively young discipline, but also coming up with some new results in that area, in the best tradition of information theory. Statistical physics methods have also become quite important. So there was of course the connection made with spin glasses and sparse gram codes and so on, but now this has progressed in many different directions. So I don't know what do you think are new mathematics that are being brought to bear or will be brought to bear in information theory? Anybody wants to take that? All right, Venkat.
I think a couple of topics. Some of the activity in additive number theory is starting to play a role. I think, for instance, Keith Ressler, who's I can see in the back over there, gave a talk with those kinds of connections in the interference alignment arena. There's been a lot of work on concentration inequalities and also hypercontractivity, for instance, people like Asaf Naur and so on. In fact, I think you also have worked with Antonio Torino along those lines. So many of those ideas that are basically belong to pure mathematics and are viewed as recent advances in mathematics have a direct bearing on our field. Oddly enough, I guess ideas like entropy have also played a role in the work of Perelman. It's not entropy in the sense in which we understand it perhaps, but it's used as some kind of entropic thinking is used as a Lyapunov function in studying the Ricci flow to solve the Poincare conjecture. So I think the fundamental thing to keep in mind is that what we are dealing with is some ways of extracting structure from randomness. The notion of extracting structure from randomness is also central to many different areas in mathematics. And any techniques that are come out of those areas that could be translated to work on, to apply to the problems that we are most interested in will always be interesting, and such things are bound to keep happening.
Okay, so let's open now the discussion to also the audience, and let's see what comments or insights that we haven't covered the audience has, and also if you have questions for the panel. All right, so we will need some microphones. Let's see. Anyone can... yeah, we can use one of the microphones here.
So maybe comment and to follow up on some of the discussions. We've been talking about in the panel how information theory has had a big impact on physics systems have relied on, and whether we do have enough interactions with networking community to kind of get together and design systems that work better than simple carrier sensing multiple access. So any comments from the panel?
I could just offer one example of information theoretic, what you might call information theoretic thinking in the wireless sort of CSMA scenario, which is the recent work of Lieben, Jiang, and Jean Walrand. I was also a co-advisor of Lieben, but this is work that he did with Jean, and this is the use of statistical mechanical ideas basically to solve the scheduling problem. Prior to this work, it was necessary to have a much more universal view of what the demand was on this multi-axis system, but now basically using techniques that are fundamentally information theoretic, because this kind of gives you an aspect to the stationary distribution. It's possible to stabilize systems using backup protocols, knowing just your own rate. And it's quite likely that this will have a practical impact also. So it's just an instance, I think, of ideas that are central to our field impacting basic problems in networking. I'm sure there are many other such examples.
I can make a comment on the physical layer side. I think it's often we are accustomed to looking at one particular problem, and I think wireless is one of those, but there's a lot of wired communication still to do. The bulk of the world's data traffic does not go through the air, it goes through optical fiber. And there is a lot of activity going on in that area right now. And I think as also the physics, you know, they constantly progress too. And then if there are new channels that come along, new ways of communicating across new types of wires, you know, it doesn't sound as exciting, but it is very exciting area that's very active right now and is very physical.
All right, more comments? John? Okay, Dan first.
I was just struck a little bit by the dichotomy. So Venkat talked about the future and being less connected to communication problems. And Gerhard's view was that we've been moving a little bit less in the entropy is decreasing, and we're concentrating our research maybe a little bit. So those seem to be a little bit opposite opinions, and I'm wondering if maybe what the other people feel about that, but if there's any way of maybe quantifying it. We ought to be able to measure the entropy of our ISIT submissions and somehow maybe come back in 17 years. And I think Gerhard's opinion was that this is the way it's going, but he hopes Venkat is right. And that's probably the opinion of most of us, that we'd like to see the field broaden. But I'm wondering if there's some way that we could actually quantify that and measure it.
I think now the information theory transactions publishes a phone book every month. So I think the law of large numbers is going to work in our favor in doing that entropy estimation.
I want to say something about this. So one thing, I learned many things this year, you know, serving as the president of society. One thing that I learned, and unfortunately it's too late because my term is over, so this may become a suggestion for future ICT organizers and future presidents, is that it's striking how little learning and collection of historical data we are missing in the organization of our conferences. For a community that is, you know, is everything about learning distributions and learning from the past and predict the future, and we should do a much better job. Every conference is almost a standalone thing. It's very hard to pass data around. So, for example, in the organization of Boston 2012, this time we were able to look at Austin and St. Petersburg and predict the size of the TPC by the number of expected papers in different areas. But it was the first time, as far as I know. So it would be actually, I think data collection, as you say, is a very good suggestion for to do. We should do it and measure this, because in fact there is a disconnect. I also have the feeling that the entropy has not reduced. Actually, if I look back, there were ICTs where you could find only Travis Scott modulation. I mean, the entropy there was almost like distribution was a big delta at the Angerbach, and then little bit else. Right? And there was one single paper, the famous 82 paper by Angerbach, that there was a reference in every single paper. So I think that actually the field has diversified, and now we see sessions on biology, sessions on machine learning, sessions on compressed sensing, matrix completion. There is a whole stuff, all new stuff. And I think that the entropy is actually increasing.
But that's a feeling. It'd be nice to.
Yes, exactly. I agree. I perfectly agree. It would be nice to have quantitative data. Absolutely.
I should add to that, my point of reference isn't the 80s. I wasn't working on information theory at that time.
Nino.
Yeah, I would have two more practical questions. How would you connect information theory to one existing phenomenon like social networks? And another question is to one upcoming topic that is smart grids in the power grids. So if you can comment, like all of you can comment a little bit.
I can say something. I will comment on smart grids. I'm completely outside any social networking, including I'm not a user of Twitter or Facebook, so I'm not the right person to ask. I think that as a scientific community, as probably many scientific communities, especially in communities that have some an applied side, we are driven by research funding. Many topics have been launched by some DARPA initiative, by some NSF initiatives, may have been inspired by research generated by us, or just by visionary ideas of some program director or some clear need. Smart grid right now looks to be an area in a desperate search of good problem definitions. So there is the search of the new channels. Smart grid is a buzz name. You may say another bigger buzz name is a cyber physical system. So you have an enormous physical system, very distributed, and you would like to control it. But at that point, controlling such a system is not a standard control problem, because the communication of carrying around the signals and the feedback and the measurements and sending back control signals becomes enormous. For the space and time scales are gigantic. And essentially, nobody knows what to do, because this includes networking, communication, and controls, and also an understanding of the physics of the system itself. So the first thing in control theory is to model the plant. But if you ask 3 different people, a power engineer and somebody else, what is the model for an electric power network distribution? And they come up with different models, and something is linearized, something is not linearized, something is look at the power as like a big bucket, somebody else look at the phasors around waveguides. It's a big mess. And I don't know if it is, it's certainly a good area to look at, according to me. At the moment, it's very, very messy. So right now, it looks like it's more people with some techniques, like mathematical tools, try to invent problems that are good for their tools. It's not quite clear if those problems are actually relevant for the ultimate goal.
All right, anybody who wants to address the second part of Dan Costello's question on Facebook? Books or Facebook?
I was actually going to address the question about social networks to some extent. I think in terms of the use of social networks, there's certainly a very direct connection with our field, because much of what, for instance, commercial entities want to do with social networks is a form of data mining, perhaps to do things like targeted advertising or better design their systems in order to maximize revenue, which is what they're mostly interested in. So I would think of something like the Netflix challenge, for instance, where many players in our community played a very prominent role, like Montanari and so on, although they weren't the winners, as being an instance of that. The second aspect has to do with just the design of social network. There is the protocols, and perhaps Raymond could speak to that, because my understanding is that network coding has a pretty significant role to play there, and it's actually active in the thinking of many companies. I'm good friends with Laurent Masoudier, for instance, who works at Technicolor, and he's very prominent in this area. One of my former students, Ganesh, who used to be at Microsoft, was also working in this area. So I won't say so much about that, perhaps Raymond could comment on that, but I would also like to point out that the structure dichotomy is very relevant to thinking in social networks. So people try to understand the nature of the interconnection graph, and structural characteristics of the graph basically relate to how well the network performs according to various performance metrics. And that's right up our alley. I mean, the structure of random graphs is a subject that should belong to information theory, and in certain aspects it does.
Let's see, Jean?
Well, I was listening to you, and then if you look at a similar panel among global leaders in the World Economic Forum, and if you ask them what are the important problems, so you will see that they are talking about food scarcity, about energy scarcity related to sustainable transportation, mobility, the power grid issue that you mentioned, but also rapid urbanization, aging and healthcare, financial instability, biodiversity, supply chain instabilities. So I think that we have a challenge of convincing, and I have one of that challenges right now in my own country of convincing our political leaders that what we do is actually relevant to solve at least some of these issues. Of course, you can argue that information and communication technologies are pervasive, so they are not just one field, but they cut across all fields. But then you have to demonstrate that what you are doing is actually being used in these various fields of application. And sometimes I feel our community is too much focused on our own field. Then also regarding the relevance or the perception of the relevance of information theory, I see a huge difference between the United States and Europe. When you go to the United States, most people in positions where they have some decision power in our fields have heard about information theory and have a positive opinion of the impact of information theory. When you go to the European Commission in Brussels, most program managers have no idea what information theory is. It's not a...
I take that as a compliment.
It's not... it's not a... Well, they have the money. And it's not even a keyword in the list of fields or areas of the European Research Council, where all of the funding for fundamental research at European level is now concentrated. So we have a lot of work there, but on a positive tone, Venkat mentioned serendipity, and that basically in many cases we were just lucky. Well, I like to believe, you know, that lucky smiles to the audacious, but also to those who are prepared, and I think that basically our community has the right culture, and I think the relationship between the senior members and the junior members is excellent in this community, and I think that this is not the case in many, many other communities, and certainly some of those that I'm also involved with. And then there's this, adding to the three traits of Sergio, I think that we are overall a curious community, so people are curious about what it is. And we like toy models, which I think is very, very different from other communities, also, by the way, from the power systems community, who likes to build huge simulations of very complex systems, rather than trying to understand toy models. And that's part of the problem where our communication issue with the energy people comes from.
In fact, toy models are very important. In fact, I think that in our talks, we should always have a disclaimer that would say the sources and channels in this talk bear no resemblance with those in reality. But yes, please.
I just wanted to add one point very briefly to Jean's comment about toy models. Actually, one of the things that makes the scientific field amenable to toy models is locality. And many of the things we do are kind of local, so it's okay to sort of build understanding for large systems from toy models. But in power systems, that unfortunately isn't the case. I mean, the power systems equation is a global equation, which involves all kinds of real and reactive powers. So one shouldn't really blame people for being a bit hesitant to use toy models.
The other, oh.
Speaking of toy model, I have a story to share. 2 years ago, I was in the office of Roberto Padovani, whom some of you may know. He was then the CTO of Qualcomm, and we were chatting about various things, and then he showed on his whiteboard one toy model of information sources that he was working with Jack Wolf. I was quite astonished as the CTO of Qualcomm working on toy models of information sources. So,
yeah, let me just come back to Joao's point. actually 2 points that you were making. You're saying that in the US things are more rosy than in Europe regarding the role of information theory. Actually, I wish that was the case. We say the funding in NSF is organized such that information theory is actually together with computer science. And the directorate actually puts a lot of its resources into network research. And it's extremely hard to get, I mean, the percentage of proposals that get funded in our area is quite low. So that's been a systemic problem.
Like, so it looks like Joel has opened up the discussion now to more on a higher ground of the big problems of humankind, right? You mentioned many of them. Yes, which is, I think, is actually perhaps, I don't want to go too much over the topic of the panel, but it is true, and I have no difficulty in admitting it. Sometimes we are worried, and also in talks, like presentations, oh, okay, the Netflix traffic is going to increase by, I don't know, a factor of 50 in the next 5 years, which is okay, but people can also live without watching movies, right? And so we are somehow, you talk about quality, that's right, it's not, high definition TV is great, but again, it's not essential. Somehow we are a little bit...
Sure it is.
Well, maybe we are facing an age, maybe we are at the age, or at the edge of an age where there will be more pressing problems for the humankind. You know, this economic crisis now, let's say we go into like 20 years of depression, like after the 29th, and then World War III. Okay, maybe people will refocus on military communication at that moment. The energy problem, the climate change, these problems, and I agree that in the mind of say people who actually allocate funds right now, there are more pressing priorities, like saving the banks and saving the auto industry, or I don't know, deciding whether investing in nuclear rather than in solar and wind, these kind of things. There is one thing that, if you think, is kind of curious, right? We are building better and better systems and faster and faster networks, yet the impact that these networks have on our everyday job life as intellectual people is relatively modest. I bet that many of you, like including me, commute to go to office in one way or another, especially if you live in Los Angeles or in Paris. But we are here, which is nice to get together and take a plane, right? To have, but why aren't we having, you know, these type of meetings over a network that allows us real intercommunication at distance? Why we cannot work at home and teach from home instead of taking a car, right? So we are still, you know, maybe if you take out all this stuff, then this will also have an impact on the way, you know, on these other issues, on say energy and pollution and urban environments and stuff like that. I think that we are not yet at the level of full exploitation of the networks that we are building. All these terabytes per second, okay, may be good for Netflix, may be good to watch more TV, but actually we don't want just watch more TV, right? Actually, the more TV you watch, the more stupid you get. We should use it to work in a nicer way. From my living room, while I'm drinking my coffee, I can also teach, for example. But as far as I know, this is not possible. And the attempts to do this now with today's technology are very large, are disasters. So at the moment, we cannot replace individual direct communication. which implies moving around, carrying around our bodies and wasting energy.
It's just actually a comment. To me, it seems like networks they passed through a huge revolution when people switched from circuit switching to packet switching, and to me it seems that it might be that we are going to have a similar thing happening with computing. Till a few years ago, we would get the things that we wanted to compute and process it on a single computer, but it might be that soon, or even nowadays, we will split our problem in chunks, and send it like packets to be processed, elsewhere in a distributed way. And this is something really relevant. I think it's a major problem, and it's about information theory. It adds another dimension that we might have not ignored, but maybe not paid enough attention recently, that, including computing power, how well you can use it. And information theory is about resources and how well you use them. So I think that a major contribution of the field, not only to this problem, but to other ones, is how to use the resources you have available in an optimal way. And probably we're going to mix, have a lot of constraints, in the way we optimize it, not only in terms of communication, but in terms of distributed computing, and in terms of energy.
Anybody who spoke too little? Well, it looks like we have covered already our allotted time, so I think it's time to thank Valdemar da Rocha for his impetus in organizing this panel, and also for his work organizing the workshop together with Costa. It has been a tremendous success. Thank the panelists who have contributed their efforts today, and thank you all for having attended. All right, so see you in the next panel, maybe in 17 years.
I realize we're out of time, but I just wanted to add a comment on behalf of all the organizers of this conference. Thank you all for your participation. This workshop would be nothing without the participation of you. So it's great that you came and stayed to the end. Thank you very much. Please come back to Paraty and to Brazil and to visit us. Thank you.